I'm here because I am a roaring lion crying out righteousness. The story I'm going to do, or yes, I call it a story, is about what was one time one of my friends, and very dear friends, Dr. Butts, Dr. Calvin Butts, who was the pastor of the Abyssinian Baptist Church, and he and I were tight. We're both alumnus of Union Theological Seminary. We were both members of the Baptist Ministers Conference of Greater New York and vicinity, and the United Missionary Association. They're here in New York as well. And we fellowshiped together quite a bit in the early years of the ministry. We're going back 40 years ago now. Well, back in August, I think, of 2022, he died, and he died of cancer. And he was 73 years old when he died, which I would consider quite young. He's very popular here in New York. He took the helm of the Abyssinian Church after it had been pastored briefly by a pastor who had been president of the A&T College. But the Abyssinian Baptist Church came to prominence globally when Adam Clayton Powell, Congressman Adam Clayton Powell, was the pastor of that church for many years. His father, Adam Clayton Powell Sr., was the founder of the Abyssinian Baptist Church, and then his father died, and Congressman Powell, who was a very, if you will, colorful person. Adam Powell was considered perhaps one of the most influential persons during the Civil Rights Movement, both under the president of John Kennedy and also under Lyndon Johnson, and was probably credited with passing more legislation, getting more bills passed in Congress than any other living person in the history of that organization called the United States Congress. And Adam Clayton Powell was that, but he was people say, like a lot of women, he was married several times. He liked to go to the Red Rooster restaurant right across the street from the Abyssinian Church, and he would drink up a storm. And he campaigned up and down the streets of Harlem, demanding that the store owners treat the employees good. And then Butts took the helm of a very powerful instrument called the Abyssinian Baptist Church. It was a young man, and Butts was well spoken. He understood politics. My thought, I didn't say this to him personally, but I would always look at him and say, one day Butts is going to be president of the United States, because he had that kind of quality. He was that kind of a person, and he was a perfect fit for Abyssinia. I am not saying I endorsed everything he said or did. I went obviously down a different road. That's why our paths did part at one point in time. In the younger days, when I was Baptist preacher, I was more aligned with the Baptist politics and, doctrine and all that, and black politics as well. But I never lost my respect. And I thought, well, if he's not going to be president, maybe he'll be, before he becomes president rather, that he would end up being the mayor of the city of New York, which was no big deal. David Dinkins was allegedly the first black mayor. I thought Butts would have done that. And if not that, then Butts would have ran to become congressman from this district, where his predecessor, Adam Clayton Powell, was congressman from this district, and he didn't run for that either. I said, well, maybe he'll run for where Charles Rangel was congressman for this district, or maybe he'll run for senator. He never ran for any public office, which baffled me. I was baffled by the fact that he never did that. At any rate, he passed away in 2022. It's been a year or so now, and the churches in the Baptist tradition, the search committee, is looking for a new pastor. And they've made a decision they're going to go with a man who Butts had groomed as. And I'm going to read a bit of the article so that we can get a sense of this. And I'll have some further comments once the article is read. So the article is a bit lengthy, but I think I need to read it in order for you to get a good sense. It says that the prominent New York church, which is Abyssinia, being sued for gender bias, moves forward with the male pastor candidate. A search committee previously sued for gender discrimination over its hiring process has announced its pick for the next senior pastor of the prominent New York City congregation considered by some to be the flagship of the Black church in America. Candidate Kevin R. Johnson, founding pastor to Dare to Imagine Church in Philadelphia, will be recommended for the congregation's approval to lead the more than 200-year-old Abyssinian Baptist Church, according to internal church memo obtained by the Associated Press. Church spokesman LaToya Evans confirmed in a statement that the committee had made its decision. The Pulpit Search Committee is confident in Reverend Johnson's ability to lead and uphold the history and legacy of our institution of faith, said the memo dated April 13. We look forward to presenting the final candidate to you and will announce the date of the congregation vote in the coming days. No woman has ever been Abyssinia's senior pastor. Johnson's selection would continue that streak. Based in Harlem, Abyssinian became a famous mega church with political rise of Adam Clayton Powell Jr., perhaps the most influential of many men who have led that congregation. Powell pastored from 1937 to 1972, served in Congress for 26 years. Over the years, Abyssinia also has been the spiritual home of many influential New Yorkers, including longtime member and Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, the prosecutor bringing the historic hush money case against former President Donald Trump. If hired, Johnson would fill the top job left vacant after longtime senior pastor Calvin O. Butts died in 2022. Johnson, 50, had served as an interim and assistant pastor under Butts, but he did not respond to the Associated Press request for comments, but became emotional, crying during one of the Sunday services at Dare to Imagine and making reference to a letter he sent to the congregation in another. Reverend Ebony Marshall Thurman of Yale Divinity School, professor and Butts, a former assistant pastor, was among the candidates interviewed in the Pulpit Search, which was criticized for being too long and lacking transparency. After not being named the finalist, Marshall Thurman, who is a woman, by the way, sued the church and the search committee in federal court for gender discrimination, an assertion the church and the committee disputed. Blessing of Baptist polity is that we ascribe to the distinctive of the priesthood of all believers. Marshall Thurman told the Associated Press after learning Johnson was selected. With the help of God, the power to call a pastor ultimately rests with the congregation. The church still has the vote. Johnson is a 1996 graduate, going back to him, of Morehouse College in Atlanta, where he took part in the Martin Luther King Chapel Assistance Program. He holds a master's degree from Union Theological Seminary, which is my alma mater, and a doctorate of education degree from Columbia University. He founded Dare to Imagine after a continuous resignation and split with the historic Bright Hope Baptist Church in 2014. And so that's that. So I wanted to be able to cover that. I thought it was important that I do this homage to my friend, Dr. Calvin O. Butts. I mourn his death. I would have had an opportunity to say a word. I didn't know he was suffering from cancer. And I think he had a very special kind of cancer and he probably had been suffering for years with it. First, the diagnosis, that's a shocker. When someone tells you, doctor diagnosed you with cancer, anybody knows that, how shocking that is. And then I imagine he began to, demise himself. It began to go down in his own health and everything. And that's a picture of the Abyssinian Church, its main floor sanctuary that Butts was the pastor of. And very popular here in New York City. And I heard that he had been sick and bedridden a year. He was on for a year. He was actually able to get up and go out. Cancer had taken him down that far. I would to God I'd had, Dr. Butts, I would to God I'd had an opportunity to speak to you. We had parted ways, mainly not for anger or anything of that nature. You drove by our church one summer and I was out in the courtyard and you happened to be driving by and you rolled down your window and said, "Hey, Manning, I thought you and I were friends," because I had said some things against his church and against his ministry as well. But he was my friend. We were friends. We were similar in age, similar pretty much in temperament, young, and 40 years ago back in the conference day and graduating, going to Union Seminary and understanding that entire experience of James Combs, James Forbes, and Cornel West. We both had that similar experience together. And I mourn his death even to this day. I would that I'd had the opportunity to speak to him. And I've met his wife on a couple of occasions. I don't know his sons. He has children and grandchildren now. But I do plan, when the Lord gives me the strength to open the ears and eyes of the people here in Harlem, I plan to do something on a memorial for you, Dr. Butts. I do. You helped me when I was coming along. You preached at this church, and I've stood there in that Abyssinian marble pulpit before our pulpit was marble. But I want anyone who's listening, most of the pastors that I talk about, Dr. Harding, Dr. Latson, Wainwright, and a bunch of others, were older than I, but Butts and I were around the same age, same educational structure, and I just simply want to say that I would you had become mayor. I don't know why you didn't run for public office. You have such qualities, and the New York media loved you. I don't know how many of y'all know about the Copacabana Club here in New York City. That's where all the mobsters went. And if you ever saw that movie Goodfellas, the Copacabana is where they went one night. The guy got his front row seat while Frank Sinatra or somebody was performing. Butts was down at the Copacabana too when Frank Sinatra. He would go down there like his predecessor, Congressman Adam Clayton Powell Jr. would hang out at the bar. Butts would hang out at places like the Copacabana. And but I want to say again, I mourn his death. I do. We were friends. And a word about the pastor, I don't know Johnson. I don't know him, Reverend Johnson, or whatever his first name is, Kevin Johnson. I think I may have seen him presiding at the eulogy. I don't know him. He's young. He's 50 years old. He's a graduate, an alumnus of Union Theological Seminary, so that tells me something about how he thinks. But the fact that this woman is challenging the church's decision to go with a male rather than a female, I think is absurd. I think is if you will, grandstanding. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I think the courts are probably going to look at it as a civil rights issue. But I would say to Kevin Johnson, and on your behalf, Dr. Butts, I think Johnson would be the one that you would choose. I would say this to the courts, and it's probably in the Southern District Court as well, that really the courts have no business meddling in who is the pastor of what church. The church is an independent, autonomous body from the court's government. Now, if the church breaks a law, then that's something else. But in terms of who is the priest of the church, the courts ain't got no business in that. And for this woman, Marshall Thurman, this Yale University professor, to say that the church is being biased would be that to say that the Bible is biased. Jesus picked 12 men to be his disciples. Was Jesus discriminatory? Was Jesus biased? So, Butts, on your behalf, I just want to get that word out. Maybe there's somebody here in New York that'll hear that. Maybe there's somebody who's a member of the Abyssinian Church who will hear it and be encouraged. But I will say this. If your sons or your children, Dr. Butts, or your grandchildren ever need any help, I will be to them as a father and a grandfather. And if someone can get the word to them, if they ever need help, I will find a way to help your I'm just sorry you left us. You left us too soon, Dr. Butts. You left us too soon. You're only 73 years of age. Listen, preachers are like old soldiers. They don't retire, they just fade away. Preachers don't start checking out until they're in their 90s. You checked out at least 20 years too soon. And probably worse than that was the pain that you went through, being bedridden after being so active and so spunky and jumping up and down and running around, and then all of a sudden you can't get out of bed, you lost weight, and you're dying, and you lay there at night knowing that you're dying, and your wife watches you die, your children watch you die. That's very painful. I'm going to put you under the altar, Dr. Butts. A lot of people may not believe that. A lot of people may say he's not worthy. You're not the one who's making the decision. I'm going to do these two things. One, if your children, grandchildren, ever need my help, I don't suppose the people at Abyssinia would ever think twice about asking me anything. We're so different in our political and spiritual opinions. But your family may be different. I'm here. If they ever need me, I'm here. And number two, I'm going to put you under the altar. That's where in the book of Revelation, chapter 6, verse 9, where people that were prominent in the cause of Christ were placed under the altar. They didn't even go to paradise. That the altar is better than paradise. And that's where I want to put you. And I want to say so long to you for right now for my friend, Dr. Butts, my friend, I wish you were still in Harlem. Were you in Harlem, I'd roll over now to knowing that I know that what I know now, I'd drive up to the Abyssinian and I'd go in there and we go down there in the kitchen and down the fellowship hall, make one of those cooks down there, cook us a meal. And I'd tell you what's going on over here with these people at this bank, Dr. Butts, if you were still among us. I wish you were. You probably were just as amazed as I am at how rapidly this community changed and lost its favor. Congressman Adam Clayton Powell Jr. would not know what to do. Congressman Adam Clayton Powell Jr. would probably kill most of these pastors personally himself with an AR-15 for where they've wrecked and raped this community and not understand anything about this community, its culture, and how my pastor and your pastors worked so hard to build these churches, and now these young boys are selling them and then calling two men to the altar to get married. I miss you, Dr. Butts. I miss you, Dr. Butts. Rest well, my friend. Praise God for this opportunity.